As I mentioned, the talk is referred to as honeybee flight and sexual reproduction. So we're going to sort of dovetail the two at about the midpoint, and then we'll talk about what bees do, what queens do on their initial flight, and all of that. So the interesting part about this particular photograph is that you cannot see the bee's wings, right? So I picked this one specifically. It's a photograph I took with the camera speed in a way so it illustrates that the actual speed of the bee's wings is so fast at times you can't see them, and you certainly can't see them when you try to observe bees in flight. You can only see them after they land on the bottom board. So we'll talk a little bit about how bees achieve that extraordinary wing movement speed as it goes on. And I always loved this because this was an article in Scientific American in November of 2005. And, it's the longstanding puzzle of honeybee flight solved at last. It's like, for depending on how you describe the genesis of the modern honeybee, there's been, millions of years where bees flew successfully. But of course, for us, we solved it back in 2005, which is sort of entertaining, to say the least. Our own hubris when bees were flying right in clear sight. So let's move to the next one. So actually, a lot of what you saw, or a lot of the reason for this mythology about bees not being able to actually fly, comes from this unfortunate engineer, Anton Mangan, where in 1934, he was actually one of the world's leading entomologists and combination aeronautical engineer. And he, at some party at some point where there was plenty of wine and some of his assistants were there, he was questioned about bee flight, and he has this infamous statement that he's made, that he said that bee flight is impossible by using he applied the laws of air resistance to insects, and he arrived at this conclusion that their flight was impossible. And he had some collaboration with an assistant of his. And so this carried on into, from 1934 on, the scientific world was evaluating any kind of bee flight in terms of these laws of air resistance. And why was it? That's the good question. So what Anton was doing back then was using Bernoulli's airfoil theory. Now, I'm not going to go over this. You don't need to know anything about this. It's just that you take the airfoil theory, and I learned this as a mechanical engineer working on helicopters also, is that, it has this lift scenario that air goes over the top, and that creates a low pressure area. And then there's air that goes straight underneath the airfoil, and it develops lift, right? So that's the airfoil theory. Now, if you unfortunately apply that to a bee wing, which is down below here, right? So let me see. Can you see my cursor? Tony, is it my cursor?
Yes, yeah.
So, you can see right away that a bee wing is not shaped anything like an airfoil. So to actually get lift using the airfoil theory is why it couldn't be explained. So now, what is most beautiful about bees is that they don't have airfoils. They have that thin, stationary, movable wing. And whoops, sorry, I gotta go back. Let's see. All right. I'm going to try to run this video. So it's actually much nicer to watch bees fly than it is to try to explain it. So there's that wing moving in a sort of like figure 8 position. And if you look on the left side, you see a slower version of how, this is a bumblebee, of course, but honeybees and bumblebees fly in the same way. And you can see that's beautiful flight of that bumblebee. And so what ended up happening was around the 1960s, what ended up replacing the airfoil theory was this other theory about leading edge vortices. And so what scientists at that point began to discuss is that instead of having lift over an airfoil, what's happening with these thin wing structures is that they're developing turbulence on their acute, when they make those acute angles that you saw on the last video. And those turbulences are what gives bees wings lift, right? So leading edge vortices, they replaced the airfoil theory, and that was a breakthrough that began to explain the way many little insects fly, and lots, just not even insects, other animals also fly the same way. And it's a natural force that exists in nature in lots of ways. Leading edge vortices are powerful. They slide off of airfoils. So if you're looking at an airfoil, and that's why I have that jet plane down there, you see behind that, you see the vortices coming that slide off of airfoils that don't provide lift. But of course, in slim wings, they stick and they provide the lift. So let me show you an illustration of a computerized illustration of what the leading edge vortices would look like now, because this is a lab and a laboratory representation of what these vortices would look like around wings in flight. So take a look at this. So all the yellow in that photograph is to try to get you to understand the principle of vortices and how they might be lifting that insect off the ground. Okay, so once that leap was made, it began to explain lots of things about bee behavior, about how insects fly, how bats fly, because bats move their wings in basically the same way, how some birds fly, including hummingbirds, and how some seeds are dispersed. So here's an example over on the right, that little video clip of a maple copter, which falls from trees. You see them all the time. And you notice they just don't fall straight down, because they could, of course, I guess, because they have a heavy weight, seed weight on the tip, but they don't. They come down in this helicopter fashion, and you can see the vortices exiting the wing, or the little maple copter as it proceeds through the air. So that's it. Leading edge vortices, they replace all of that. They end up explaining to us how bees actually fly. And then again, in ultra slow motion, you get to see how beautiful that action actually is.
What about these bees is that they're all carrying pollen.
Sorry about that. So here they are. So here's this huge pollen load on that bee. And there's the wings. You can see there's action here that bees are using to back up on that one. They can fly backwards, sideways, or they can hover. So it's sort of symphonic. They look like orchestra conductors in some ways when you can see in this one, the bee's whole body is being moved around a little bit by the action of those wings. Just fascinating stuff. And then of course it has to be, those wings have to be dry. So the first thing you do, if you're going to take off, you got to shake the water off of them before you can actually fly. So bees have adapted perfectly to flight over the millions of years they've had time to adapt and know exactly how to move it. Now, we talked a little bit about these indirect, I think you even saw this GIF in the last presentation I gave. And so I'll talk about how, at this point, how bees actually move their wings. Their wings are attached to the thorax. The thorax has 3 or 4 different parts to it. But where the wings are attached, they're not really connected to the flight muscles. The flight muscles, that's why they call them indirect flight muscles. And when bees move their flight muscles, their thorax moves in concert with the flight muscles. They extend a set of horizontal flight muscles, and then they extend a set of, or contract a set of vertical muscles. And that action pulls their thorax up and down, and it sets up a vibration on the top of their thorax, which actually lets them achieve a wing speed higher than the actual musculature would allow under normal neurological stimulation. So for you and I, who have direct musculature, we send a brain to our finger muscles move, they go back, they tense up, move our finger joints, then go back to relaxation and tense up again if we want to move it again. So most animals work that way, but insects, their wings have a combination of musculature and tendon in them, in these indirect flight muscles. And once they get a neurological signal, it can continue to vibrate the thorax between that signal and the next. So they can achieve speeds of, say, 200 to 250 beats per second, because a regular neurological cycle takes about 200 milliseconds to complete. And if you have 1,000 milliseconds in a second, and you do that division, then you would only be able to get a limited amount of wing beats out of you'd only be able 5 milliseconds, 5 milliseconds to complete. So if you divide that into 1,000, you would end up getting 200 beats per second would be the ultimate speed you could achieve with a wing. But we know some flies that can beat their wings at 1,200 beats per second. And so it's easy to achieve with this wonderful thorax arrangement, rates in the 220 to 250 range. So bees also have a set of direct flight muscles. I'll talk about them in the next slide, but these are just some facts about the flight muscles inside of regular honeybees, and they can tense and release 15 to 40 times from a single brain signal, which is something you cannot do. Among the highest, they have the highest metabolic rate in the animal kingdom. So even elite athletes, human elite athletes, don't come anywhere near the metabolic rate that can be achieved by these flight muscles inside bees. And they are it's a perfect adaptation for both flying and heating the colony. Because if you notice in that last slide, these are indirect musculature. This is indirect musculature. So they can stop the movement of their wings. And I'll explain that in a few slides. They can stop the movement of their wings and just continue to lock their flight muscles into action. And then they become heater bees at that point. And so that's how they generate heat. All right, so you'll notice that there's on the bottom of these charts, you'll notice that there's some references down there. If you want to learn more about anything that I state here, most of what I'm telling you, I have a source for, and I've researched. So you're welcome to let me know if you want some more information. I'll send you a link to these papers, and you can read them for yourself. They're fascinating, and they explain basically what I've distilled for you here in these different slides. All right, so you notice again, I'll recall the video, you notice that the bees are not just, their wings are not just going up and down. They have a set of direct flight muscles which are not engaged in the actual beating of the wings, but they do allow the bee to use the direct flight muscles, allow the bees to use have their wings have a sweeping motion, a heaving motion, and a pitch. So that's like, they vary that, the sweeping, heaving, and pitching based on the load they're carrying and the direction they want to fly in. So even though these direct flight muscles are not usually a subject of discussion and there's very little known about them, you can find them in the dissection, the books on dissection, especially the one by Ian Stell, which Understanding Bee Anatomy. He got a full color guide of how all this musculature works. And in there you can see different dissections of these different muscles if you're that interested in how they work, right? So you got a set of indirect flight muscles that gives you the speed, the wing movement, and then these direct flight muscles that allow for various loads. All right, so just some sort of interesting facts about bees and what foragers especially are using their wings more than any other bee in the colony. And the problem with foragers, of course, is that they lose their wing integrity after a while. And the reason for that is that if you're taking the low end, 220 wing beats per second, that translates into like over 13,000 wing beats per minute. So if you look at that as a 2-mile round trip of a forager at about 15 miles an hour, you get about 100,000 wing beats. So every time a bee leaves your colony, flies out to a floral source and flies back, or goes out and gets pollen or whatever, and comes back, it takes about 100,000 wing beats, assuming that it's only a 2-mile round trip, right? So of course, if it's a 4-mile round trip, that would be 200,000 wing beats. And then if you look at some of the literature, talks about bees can easily make 20 trips a day, and that would equal 2 million wing beats in that particular day. And at that point, you know, if you look at the length of a forager's life being maybe 21 days or so, you can see that at 2 million beats a day, you're talking about 42 million wing beats. And that's in 21 days. Now, I don't know if some of you may have noticed this with your own bees, that foragers in a really heavy flow will exhaust their capabilities of flying in way less than 21 days. And you can lose a field force of foragers in 7 or 8 days if there's a big heavy flow on, and they're really going out for trips every day from sunup till sunrise. So whereas we sort of give you these nominal numbers that bees maybe live 6 weeks, 3 inside the colony and 3 outside, that's not exactly true. So if there's a heavy load on them, they die sooner, right? And here's a bee, a couple of photographs I took of bees that have wing wear, and that contributes to the end of life of foragers. In addition to the fact that they run out of glycogen stores, which bees are very capable of being able to convert energy, but they have to do that in a special way in their hemolymph, and they use glycogen to actually achieve that at the Krebs cycle or the muscular cycle or cellular cycle, which actually makes fibers move. So that happens, and they run out of that, and they run out of wings, and they die. Right. So that's just a natural occurrence. Of course, if a colony's under real stress to forage for resources, there will be a pheromonal cacophony that occurs inside the colony, concerning which is controlled by both the brood and other workers, that will advance other nurse bees into foragers much sooner, and they'll replace that field force. So bees have a way of adapting, even though their field force is dying at a higher rate. They'll replace it with recruits, as we refer to them. All right, just some fun facts about bees. According to Eva Crane and common sense, and maybe even your own observation, you'll notice that bees seldomly fly in wind speeds of 15 miles an hour or better. And I'll prove to you that 2 things: that bees can carry a pollen load. Well, this was research by Winston, so you can read this in Mark Winston's book, he said that there's under certain nectar loads and pollen, bees can carry 80% of their body mass. Now just think about that. That means that, well, they can fly at 15 miles an hour also with 80% of their body mass. That means that bees can, if you take a 100-pound person and you would have to carry 80 pounds and fly at 15 miles an hour, that's quite a feat for an animal of any size to be able to do. So honeybees are extraordinary flyers, and I think they're heavy lifting champions, and I'll show you why I think that on the next slide. But bees fly straight, and so what they do is they can discover how to fly straight with images that they've recorded from their eyes and travels while they're going out to a source. So when bees leave the colony, they fly up, and now they're taking environmental cues of what the right and left side eyes see. And they develop a map that allows them to compare those images. And they won't go closer to one than the other. So they fly straight by making sure that they always equalize the distance between those two images that they have from both eyes. They're on their way via a waggle dance and directions from the other foragers to a source. But they have to know how not to fly into objects like buildings, trees, and so forth. So they have this visual map that they carry. And when they get to their source, they forage a little bit, they leave that source, and they fly back. Now they're reversing those mental images, and they continue to fly back straight back to the colony without getting tangled at any other resources by using those images that they have for that flight. Now, these visual flight control stuff and navigation piece was all researched very interestingly long ago, by the way. So we've known this for a very long time. And how they did is they made bees fly through a little tube, and then they had images on both sides of the tube, stripes or blocks or whatever. And then while bees were flying, they changed those images. And by changing the images on either side, they could get the bees to move either to the left or the right as they flew through the tunnel. So that's how they determined that bees have visual flight control. Queens can carry the weight of a drone. I'll show you that in a minute. That's an unbelievable feat. And then bees can carry their entire weight of another bee. We know that from undertaker bees. Now I've seen, and I'm sure you have also seen, bees carry another bee away from the colony, one that's sick or died or something like that, or just was not needed in the colony for some reason. They can also, under circumstances where that bee is actually too heavy for them to carry away, like a big old drone or something. I've seen bees join up, two honeybees join up to carry a single bee away from the colony, like a big drone. And so they do also, they do that also, which is of course another amazing sort of feat. So I'm saying that bees, by being able to carry about 80% of their body weight, that they are the lift capacity champions, the best attempt that humans have ever made at being able to lift weight is the Antonov AN-225. This was only built one time, and there's only one plane in existence, or was in existence. I'm not sure if it's around anymore. And this was part of the Russian space shuttle program. You can see, of course, the Russians never got a space shuttle program off, but this was going to be the vehicle that carried the Russian space shuttle, which looks similar to our space shuttle. And it weighed 1,280,000 pounds. So it was a huge, huge plane, 6 engines, and the cargo capacity was about a little over 500,000 pounds, right? Or close, well, 559,000 pounds, right? So that's 44% carrying capacity. So, bees, if you think about all the pollen that's in suspension all over the world every single day, it's possible that bees are carrying way more than any Antonov could ever lift. So that's my sort of jokingly assertion that that bees are lift capacity champions. And you can read that both from von Frisch and Snodgrass about the carrying capacities also. So it's in a lot of other sources. Now, I said a drone can carry a queen can carry the weight of a drone. You may have seen this, but it's worth watching this again. It's kind of fun to watch. This is a queen going out on a mating flight, a virgin mating flight. I don't know how these videos are coming through. I hope they're clear. Are they clear, Paul? Tony?
Yes, they're clear.
Okay. All right, there's two beekeepers pointing to a drone comet. And so now the drones are following this queen. She's a virgin at this point. She's flying away and they're trying to attach. And this one finally latches on. And if you'll notice, there's a point where his enthusiasm causes him to stop flying. And then she's carrying his weight and he inserts his endophallus. And then you're going to see where this is not so good for a drone. His endophallus snaps off and he lies there on the ground dead. All right, so you can see that queens can carry their weight of a drone. And that leads us into the next segment, which is going to be about fertilization of queens. But you'll notice that that drone, when it bent backwards, its endophallus snapped, and of course that presents a problem for the next drone that's going to mate with that queen. So the next drone that approaches that queen has a special set of hooks on his endophallus, which will remove the last endophallus that was in the queen so he can insert his. Now that goes on and on for a period of time until the queen calls it quits and then goes back to the colony. That can happen, 10 times on a mating flight, 15 times on a mating flight. And then she ends up coming back to the colony. But when she comes back to the colony, she returns with the last drone's endophallus. So last drone's endophallus and process, and if we're going to use sort of nominal numbers here, she may come back with maybe 100 million sperm from her mating flights. This is a picture of the last mating sign. And so now the question is, what happens to all of those 100 million sperm once they get inside of the queen during her mating flight? And of course, this is not the only mating flight she's going to take. And it may not be that she comes back with 100 million sperm. She can come back with a lot more. Current research is indicating that some queen bees will mate with up to 40 single drones. And so we've sort of, in the last two studies that I read, we've shattered sort of our old thinking about this, 10 to 12 to 14 average drone matings, where we're finding that there are some patrilineal lines inside bee colonies that represent 40 different drones. It's an amazing discovery, and it sort of shook all the bee biologists that have professed this sort of lower number for decades. So we don't really know. You can't tell in your own yard how many drones your queen's mated with. We know that if she mates with 12 or 15, that will be sufficient. All right, so what does she do with all of that sperm? Okay, so the first stop for it all is in every place that's in, this is one of Snodgrass' Anatomy of Bees. Remember, Snodgrass did all of this hand-drawn with dissections that were done with not modern microscopy, but with old stuff. So it's an incredible effort on Snodgrass' part. He was one of the most brilliant bee scientists that ever lived. And his anatomy diagrams are relevant even to today, even though we have much more sophisticated scopes and we can do much more sophisticated microscopy, no one's ever challenged any of Snodgrass's work. So they have to end up in this little organ called the Spermatheca, which I have outlined with that arrow. It's right there. But what ends up happening is all of that sperm can't be directly injected into a queen's spermatheca. It has to migrate in. And it ends up in lots of places in the bees, in the queen's cavity. And its lateral oviduct is one of the places that can accommodate millions and millions of sperm. So because of the rapid sort of force of that ejaculate into the queen, it's forced into those different areas. Now, it doesn't stay there, right? The queen goes through a series of, I'll show you in the next slide, there's a series of manipulations that I'll talk about, how the sperm gets from those lateral oviducts into that spermatheca. And here's another place or show another view of what's in there. There's of course the sting, and the drone has avoided all of that during his mating ritual. And here's the vaginal canal. That's all filled with sperm and mucus from the drone as he fertilizes the queen. And also, as you'll notice, these oviducts here, this is lateral oviducts, also carry a lot of that sperm. And it has to get from, the sperm has to get from these locations, the vaginal canal and the oviduct, into the spermatheca. So how does that happen? And by the way, here's a slide of male, of drone sperm. And, you know, if you know anything about the anatomy of animal sperm, you'll notice right away that for some reason, some unexplained reason, drone sperm has this incredible tail on it, just a huge long tail. And it has to, you know, that sperm has to migrate the same as any other animal sperm. And it just has this large tail. I just thought that was interesting to see. So now how does all of this get into the spermatheca? Well, when the queen is first goes on her mating flight, she comes back into the colony. She has that endophallus in her. The first thing that the bees do when she comes back is they remove that endophallus, and then she's free to begin to move her abdomen by contracting it. When she contracts it, she's pushing the sperm out of the oviducts and vaginal canal toward her spermatheca. There, they're in the spermathecal duct right here, this duct right here that goes down to her oviducts, right? There's a pump in there. And there's a pumping action that when the spermatheca is empty, it helps, along with the queen's abdominal contractions, it helps fill the spermatheca with sperm. So it's being pumped into the spermatheca. The contractions are helping with the force, and then of course the bees can the sperm can swim, so they're swimming up toward the spermatheca. Now, only about 5%. So we looked earlier and we said that, or we discussed earlier that maybe 100 million sperm are in the lateral ducts in the vaginal areas. But after migration, which takes about 10 to 12 hours, aided by the things we discussed, only about 5% make it, or about 5 million sperm make it. So that indicates to you, as a beekeeper, the life of your queen's mating capabilities. So if your queen has 5 million sperm in it, and a percentage of them are dead, right? Because they're not all live, and they won't all make it in live. And lots of times the drones don't have a full percentage of live sperm. For the most part, it's live, but can be 20% of them are dead. So if you look at about 5 million sperm that end up in the queen's spermatheca. We'll just use that as an example. If it takes on average about, this is an interesting number, about 1.5 sperm to fertilize an egg. And so let's say you could fertilize 5 million eggs. Let's just take it 1 to 1. That would mean that at 200,000 eggs a day, right, or eggs a year that she fertilizes, you can see the life of your queen is limited, you know, by that 5 million sperm. Right, that's actually makes up her fertile lifespan. All right, so that's a lot of information, I know, but you know, you can't get a queen to live for 10 years because she would be infertile after, you know, a certain amount of time, because she would run out of eggs. She'd be a drone layer. Right? We've heard about that. All right, so how do we know that sperm migration actually occurred? Well, you don't most of the time, but there's occasions when, if you're really observant and you're in a queen mating yard, or you're doing your own queen rearing, and you're in your colonies during times when they're getting mated, you might notice this little string hanging out of the back of your queen. Let me show you what this looks like on this little video. You might be able to see that little string hanging back right in there. That little string is evidence that all of the extraneous mucus and other non-sperm items that are in the ejaculant of a drone they get expelled in this long string that it hangs out of the back of the queen. So you might even have seen this. And so let me show you what that looks like. So there it is. Now bees will grab that and pull it out of the queen. Now you're going to see that they're looking to grab it, right? And there she goes. Oh, that one, it's already missing. So they did actually take it out. Now I have seen that little string. And the last one I saw, actually, the queen was desperately trying to get attention, to have help. So she was on the foundation quacking, making that beautiful sound that queens make. And there were bees around her. And I was so tempted to pull that string out, but I left it for the bees to clear out on their own. And they did successfully. And that queen went on to be a wonderful queen. But if you see that, in my opinion, is more valuable to you as a beekeeper than seeing the mating sign, which is something that beekeepers want to see. You know, they don't look for it as much as, you know, it's a curiosity, and if they want to be able to say they've seen that. And so, but this is more valuable to you, that little string coming out, because the little string of extra material indicates that the sperm has successfully migrated, and the queen is expelling all the rest out. So now let's take a look at what a Spermatheca looks like. So a Spermatheca is a wonderful little organism. I will spend time every season dissecting them out of bees, usually from a failing queen, because if you do this with a good queen, of course, it's over for her. So if there is no sperm inside of a Spermatheca, it will look like this. And this is on a penny. These are from Sue Colby's photographs. This is on a penny, just to try to give you the indication of the size of a Spermatheca. Now, that's a very durable gland, and you can actually field strip it out of a queen. And if you get good at it, you'll be able to figure it out every time. I use my dissecting scope to take them out. It makes it much easier. I always get the sperm out. I always get the Spermatheca out, and I can then look at and see whether or not that queen was fertilized or not. So there is the spermathecal duct. You can see it hanging on the bottom of that one that's full of sperm. No sperm, full of sperm. So if you were to do this, go to Sue Kobe's website. She'll give you instructions, step-by-step instructions on how to do this. And on the first top left there, she's got her hands on the thorax of the bee, and then she's got 2 fingers on the abdomen, and she just pulls it right out. And then she claims you can roll your fingers around and the spermatheca will pop right up, and then you'll have it. These are as these progress from left to right on top. There she's rolling it around in her fingers. There it's out. Now there's a tracheal net over the top of it. That tracheal net keeps all that sperm alive inside the bee, inside the queen for her entire fertile life. And then if you strip that tracheal net off, which I do under my dissecting scope, you end up with this beautiful pearl-like gland, which is a full spermatheca, right? So if you ever have occasion to do this, if you have a failing queen, or you have a queen that you're going to replace for some reason, maybe it's just a ill-tempered hive, or something else. You just want a different variety queen in your colony, or whatever it is you want to do. Try this. You'll learn a little bit about anatomy, and you become more familiar with the insides of your bees. All right, so next step after migration is the queen will start fully developing her ovaries. And if you look at Snodgrass' picture up front here, are a little bit in depth, notice that it's filled with these are eggs being developed. These are small cells way up in the top of the ovarioles. Each set of ovaries has a number of little ovarioles that make eggs. So you can see them in this beautiful Snodgrass presentation. You can also see them coming down into the lateral oviduct here. There's a pile of eggs that go in there. They actually are not eggs at this point when they first go into the lateral oviduct. They go through their last cycle, and they then become full eggs before they progress on to, and Snodgrass has these being held and being fertilized. There's the Spermatheca. They pass the Spermatheca. That's how they get fertilized. I'll show you a little bit more about that later on. But here's the whole picture. All these beautiful ovarioles making eggs. The eggs go down into this lateral oviduct. They get held on the Spermatheca if they're going to be fertilized, and they go on to be laid inside cells. All right, so this whole process is called oogenesis, and it begins with it begins at top. You see that little TF up there, and then don't pay attention to much of this, except that the egg is progressively getting larger. It's being fed by a nurse cell behind it, which gives it all of its nutrition. It goes down this is called oogenesis because these are called oocytes. They're not actually eggs until they get into the lateral oviduct. They go through their last molt formation. And then this whole process, for every ovariole that your queen has, they probably lay about 5 eggs per day under perfect conditions. So each ovariole inside of a queen's ovary can lay about 5 eggs per day. So now if you were to look at, we've been through, plenty of dissections of queen's ovaries, and we found that there, at times, some queens will have as many as 438 ovarioles. That's way high. So the average is somewhere below that. But if you just took 400 for an example, and 5 eggs per day per ovariole, you can see that the limit of your bee's egg-laying capability, of your queen's egg-laying capability, is 2,000 eggs a day, right? So a queen can lay 2,000 eggs a day under perfect conditions, but not much more than that. So if you hear people talk about, their queens laying 5,000 eggs a day or 2,500 eggs a day, just know that that's a very good queen with lots of ovarials and possibly way at the top of the norm for what queens are capable of in terms of being able to lay eggs. So the limiting factor is ovarials. And how do you get a lot of ovarials in a queen? Partially it's genetics, but also great nutrition during a queen's early life as a larva provides queens, and also the right age larva selected to make a queen. Both of those contribute to queens with big abdomens and full ovaries with lots of ovarials, and the capability of being able to, if fertilized correctly, being able to deliver lots of eggs and be a wonderful queen. All right, this is just more on it. I'm not going to spend much more time on it. I think I explained all of this. Its last division occurs in the lateral oviduct, then it becomes an egg, and it's finding its way down to the through the oviduct into what is called the valve fold. So now this path here you're looking at, right? This oviduct, this is the vaginal canal. There's eggs come down this oviduct and they pass through this valve fold. And I'll explain this valve fold in a minute. Then they proceed on their way down the vaginal canal and into a cell, right? So when you see your queen laying eggs, that's the process that's occurring. Now, if it's going to be a female, what happens is the egg makes its way down the oviduct, comes to this area where the valve fold is, and the valve fold contracts and holds the egg in place as the sperm is pumped out of the spermatheca using this extraordinary, I'll show you the action of this spermathecal pump on the next chart. And in that sperm is some pressure, some fluid pressure. So the combination of having activity in the spermatheca in terms of fluid and the egg finding its way down the spermathecal duct and aided by the pump, the spermathecal pump, sperm comes down the spermathecal duct and fertilizes the egg, and then she releases the valve fold and the egg continues on its way and becomes a female worker. Now, if this is a drone, and she's determined that, by the way, by examining the cell for size, the queen has with her front legs. And if it's going to be a drone, this idea of this whole mechanism where the valve fold holds the egg doesn't occur, and no action from the spermatheca induces sperm to flow down the spermathecal duct, and therefore the egg just passes through this area of valve fold and exits the vaginal canal into the cell unfertilized. So that's how. So that's basically how amazing queens are, queen honeybees are, and the whole process, the whole natural process. This happens in many different kinds of insects, all bees and all egg-laying eusocial insects that require both drones, males and females. So this is not just specific to honeybees, but it's the one that we're concerned with. All right, so the queen makes some kind of decision here, and we don't know how. No one will ever be able to tell you how that's done. I get that question all the time, and it's just something that we know occurs because we have observational data that that's undeniable that a queen can lay unfertilized eggs and fertilized eggs. We know from our dissection and the microscopy of this valve fold area that that's what's occurring. And we know how the valve fold actually works. It's musculature. And it kind of works like this. This GIF showing you the example of how it works. So this is the sort of contractions on this spermathecal pump. Now think about this. This is from Breslau back in 1905 is when was certainly discovered. Lots of extraordinary observations. Now, I mentioned earlier that the spermathecal pump is actually a two-way pump. When the queen is fertilizing eggs and the spermatheca is filled with sperm, pressure inside that spermatheca, as I just mentioned, causes sperm to travel down the duct, and then it gets assisted by the spermathecal pump to fertilize the egg. But when sperm is migrating into the spermatheca, the spermathecal duct is filled with sperm in the opposite direction. The pressure is now up the spermathecal duct, and the pump is loading the spermatheca with sperm. So it's a two-way valve, right? Kind of interesting. Now, what happens when it gets down and gets down to the egg? So this is a colorized egg. It does have this sort of net we call chorion over the egg. Now you can see that under a microscope. It's extraordinary stuff. And it, I guess, keeps the egg in shape. It's called chorion. It's a different part. It's not part of the egg itself. It's covering. And there are what we refer to as a micropyle, which is where the sperm enters into the egg. Now it's a one sperm entry. Now this is picture on the right is showing you two sperm trying to do the job, but really the one on the top is the only one that's going to enter into the egg. If you get multiple sperm fertilizing one egg, you get some interesting bees, and that doesn't usually happen. But the median sperm use is 2 eggs per sperm over the life of the queen. So two sperm per egg over the life of the queen, right? So so that basically is the productive life. As I mentioned, if you have 5 million sperm in the spermatheca, you can see you're limited by how many eggs you can actually fertilize. All right, so this micropyle is a common, as I said, there's lots of eggs that get fertilized this way. And I think it's a kind of a beautiful mosaic and kind of one of these natural, gorgeous developments in biology that there seems to be no reason for, except when you begin to look at them, they just get nicer and nicer looking. This is the blue butterfly, and there's the micropyle in the center there of that's a blue butterfly egg. And that's the chorion. It has a different configuration on this particular egg. There's one of the owl butterfly. And, again, different chorion and a different looking micropyle. Of course, these are all colorized based on the shades that were observed, but they're just more and more beautiful. And then this is the red lace butterfly, same thing, kind of a different chorion configuration, but then that micropyle, that sperm will eventually fertilize that egg through. And then, of course, when we know what happens next when sperm does actually get into the egg, it goes through metamorphosis. And, I'll just show you this. I'm sure you've seen it, but just so hold on. So you know what happens when we go through metamorphosis. It's a fertilized egg. It melts down into a larva, and then the larva are fed pools of wonderful food from the mandibular and glands of bees. Then they develop into pupa. This is under capped cells normally, but in this case, the cells were uncapped. And so we make this observation. Here they are maturing as pupa. You can see varroa running around in those cells. The final stage is they get into purple eyes and so on and so forth. Brains develop. You can see that happening in that skull. and then they eventually turn into adult bees and emerge from their cell. In this case, they don't have to emerge because the caps were taken off and conditions were preserved so they will live. There they go. And that's it. Boom. So that's all I have. Let me see if I can unshare the screen. Okay. All right. Okay, so that's it. I mean, I'll take any questions you have. I forgot to mention that you could have asked me questions anytime during that presentation. And so if you have some questions about what I presented, that's fine. I'll be glad to answer them now.
Absolutely
or any
fascinating,
other questions you
Bill.
have
Absolutely
concerning bees
fascinating.
and beekeeping. Tony, you got anything in the chat or anything?
One question, questions coming up in the chat.
Is my mic
Wondering
off?
if you could provide, oh, let me see. Phone.
I can hear you now. You there, Tom?
Okay, can you hear me?
Cool.
Okay. Someone's asking if you could, if they could request a list of your references
Yeah.
to some of the articles on your slides.
Sure. Not right now, but I'll get them.
No, obviously. Yeah, I'll get your contact information off to the requester. And absolutely fascinating. Those were some great views. They helped clear up a few things for me in terms of where the sperm is stored during the mating flights or in the midst of the mating flights and sort of pooled and getting transferred up into the Spermatheca. That was just in depth and just extremely informative. Thank you.
Yeah, so you're welcome. Yeah, I think that's really an interesting part of the way queens get fertilized. I also have a queen rearing, as I mentioned to you earlier. I don't know if I mentioned in my bio or not, but I am the president of the Connecticut Queen Breeders Cooperative. So we do artificial insemination, and we also do open mating. So that's kind of important to us. Those little things.
Now, do you have any classes during the summer?
Yeah, we hold
COVID willing, if we can start meeting back in person. Do you have queen rearing classes or?
Yes, we have queen rearing, and we also have an insemination course. So if you wanted to come down and learn how to do your own insemination, or just note it, or just watch it, I mean, it's an interesting process, and it's my favorite is natural mating, but we do, to preserve genetics and to provide genetic material for other beekeepers, we do instrumental insemination.
Excellent.
So you can see that too. So yeah, kind of fun to watch.
Very cool. If anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and just introduce yourself and go ahead and ask Bill a question. Any questions? Or you can put something in the chat if you'd like me to go ahead and ask Bill. Whole lot of information, densely packed. So,
well, I mean, if folks get questions later on, they can always email.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'll get Bill your contact information out to members for the talk. You're going to be with us again on, is it this coming Tuesday or the following Tuesday? December 1st.
This coming Tuesday.
Okay, this coming Tuesday, talking about two queen systems, two queen in a hive and production colony. So that's going to be a great talk.
Yeah, that's usually, the last time I gave that was at It was up in Massachusetts, but it was at not their SNEBA. They have like you guys have a, oh God, what's the name?
Mass Bee fall meeting or spring meeting?
Yeah, it was one of the fall spring meetings. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a great way to make honey.
Excellent. Looking
It takes a
forward
little
to
practice.
that. Yes, I'm sure it's involved.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
All
If no one has any questions, then we'll let Bill go, and we'll see him on Tuesday night. If you have any questions for me about club business, you can hang on, and we can chat live. But other than that, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Bill, for an
No
excellent
problem.
presentation.
Thank you so much.
And we'll see you on Tuesday.
Okay. Thanks for having
Okay.
me. Talk to you later.
Yep. Take care. Thank you, everyone.